Hello and welcome to this special broadcast. Today we focus on the evolving relationship between China and Africa within the context of a multipolar world. As global power becomes more distributed among several countries, Africa finds itself engaging with multiple international partners, with China playing a particularly significant role. This partnership has grown rapidly over the past 2 decades, touching on trade, investment, infrastructure, and diplomacy. However, as the global landscape changes, so do the opportunities and challenges for African countries in navigating these ties, and understanding this complex dynamics is essential for grasping Africa's position in the world we are living in today. To discuss these important questions and issues, we have to provide an expert insights. We are pleased to invite and welcome Dr. Thembisa Fakude, Senior Research Fellow at the Africa-Asia Dialogue and Director and Co-Shareholder of the Mail and Guardian. Thank you for joining us, Doctor. To start, can you give us the current state of the relations between Africa and China today?
Well, the current state is one of mutual beneficial relationship where China is coming to invest in Africa and Africans are working with China. A couple of days ago, China decided to scrap all the tariffs on 53 African countries except Eswatini, which is a country that has recognized Taiwan as a state, and of course, as a result, offended China, so they didn't benefit from this scrapping of tariffs. So the relationship between Africa and China is the one that is on an upward trajectory, particularly now with Trump and his tariff wars. African countries have got an alternative for their products and services. And China is hungry and willing to take the surplus as a result of China's tariffs. So that relationship is likely to continue. Of course, also China comes in with a new attitude towards business. It's a see no evil, hear no evil attitude. Whereas in the past you had these countries, particularly from the West, who have come in with a number of conditions when doing business with Africans, and their main purpose was to exploit Africa, particularly immediately post-colonization. So you have China that is doing business, and not only doing business, but is also filling up the gaps that are left, particularly the donor and philanthropic gap that has been left by Western countries in Africa. And China is now beginning to realize that it's only not just about business, but also about giving back.
So we can say that China today is a reliable partner, especially when it comes to attracting investments coming from China to Africa. And especially there are some opportunities because of the Trump administrations, because of the tariffs. And that's why we can see that there are some opportunities when it comes to trade relations with this country. What are the main drivers behind China's growing influence in Africa, and how are African countries responding to this engagement?
China is benefiting largely from raw material because there's still a lack of industry that beneficiates from raw material in Africa. So African minerals are being extracted and taken to China, and China is bringing back as finished goods, as it used to happen with European and the US companies. Still happening because Africans have failed till now to come up with industries and factories that can assist in terms of converting the raw material into finished goods. As a result, they could then benefit from the minerals. So what China is doing precisely that. And China is in business. And China as a country facilitate business. It's businessmen from China who are doing business with Africans. And the purpose of business and the objective of business is maximization of profits. So if you as a Chinese businessman, you will come to an African boardroom and you find that there are laws that are not there, you will benefit from the absence. That's your purpose and objective. So the call from some of us to African countries is that, get your countries and your, business in order. Because if you don't do so, you don't expect businessmen and your partners and colleagues from other countries to come and tell you what to do so that they can reduce their profits. So this is a new call to African countries that they need to make sure that they're fit for purpose. There are policies in place that will protect the vulnerable environments within Africa, particularly the dumping and pollution and other degradation of environment. It's key that it exists. In South Africa, for example, where I come from, the reason why we don't have much exploitation is because there are systems in place. So when a businessman from China comes to South Africa, he expects to abide by the law, pay taxes, and all the things that come with doing business. And largely African countries are not fit for purpose when it comes in that respect. And as a result, you continue to have this exploitation. And hopefully, of course, things will change soon.
I can say there is a Western discourse about investments coming from abroad, and especially from China and Africa, that they are taking risks. Is it really true that going for emerging markets, for example, I can take the BYD, for example, in the automotive industry, where we have also some competitors like Tesla in the United States not going into emerging markets where the automotive industry, especially for electric vehicles, for example, is not very mature enough. Is it a bold move from Africa to do that? And do you think it's a successful opportunity?
I think it will be a successful opportunity. The manner in which, but again, it's about culture. The Chinese culture is totally different to Western culture. And it gives comfort to a large extent because they're dealing with people who understand your situation, who themselves have been oppressed at some point. And they understand and appreciate the conditions in Africa. And also there's an element of obedience from Chinese businessmen. It takes one letter from Beijing to a Chinese business that's violating the law or doing anything unacceptable in business in Africa to actually stop doing so. So there's that culture in China. Whereas in the United States, not only they've got a rule of law and they've got platforms through which they can complain, you can't just write, well, now Donald Trump does it with his executive orders, but before you couldn't just write a letter to Google or Microsoft from the White House to tell them to stop doing what they're doing. And that, to a large extent, created some kind of challenges for African business and the business practices in Africa. Whereas China, there is a clear instruction, and often those instructions are adhered to by business. And when African leaders or heads of state do complain in Beijing about a company, something does happen compared to what we've had in the past. So that kind of proximity and ease in terms of decision and political decision and influence, and the proximity that the government in Beijing has with its own business people around the world has to an extent given some sort of confidence in terms of recourse, particularly for Africans who really now do believe that we have a recourse. Not only do we take Chinese companies to international courts if we want to complain, but it's a telephone call to a representative or the embassy for that matter. I know instances where embassies got involved, particularly with a number of violations that have been taking place in many African countries, because China is also interested in its image and PR. And if you really do observe, and I've never been the one who sings who sings the praises of China, but you see a huge difference in terms of how China is doing business, how they adhere to rules and regulation, how they're working very closely with governments in terms of ensuring that it's not only about business, but also about development, particularly social, cultural development. We're seeing more and more Chinese.
And it's very important to emphasize on that nexus between development and also having profits and doing business. And it's important also to remember that business is also a mindset, and we can have different mindsets in doing so. In what ways does the multipolar world, where we have like multiple powers, compete for influence, impact Africa's agency with its relationship with China?
Well, the multipolarity at the moment is largely in politics, not necessarily in business. You have business people coming in to do business, as it has been the case traditionally. But multipolarity in Africa, at least for now, is largely in politics.
Absolutely.
Where you've got Russians, whether it's Wagner Group or the Turkey is coming in, the Horn of Africa, and the Chinese coming into Africa. But China is much more of a political economy than anything else. And again, I'm notwithstanding the benefits that will come with multipolarity, but I'm really wary about this concept of multipolarity because what it seeks to do, I think, and this is still to be proved, but it's going to compete with multilateralism. And me as a minority and as an African, I've benefited from multilateralism because what multilateralism did was to standardize practice and protect us as minorities, whether it's about injunctions and resolutions at the United Nations against slavery or against oppression of women. It was a multilateral system that led us as Africans to climb the ladder and find ourselves in a political position that we find ourselves. Now, if you want to dismantle that, you come up with something called multipolarity. which is what? You're basically segmenting the existing platforms by giving power to certain wannabes or those who want to occupy the new positions of power. Now, what are they going to do with it? Are they going to, as we see at the moment to Trump, deliberately dismantling multilateralism by saying the United States is going to go it alone and I'm going to impact and impose sanctions on everyone and put the gun in everyone's head. And if they don't, I'll shoot you. As he said with Iran, for example, I'll bomb you if you don't agree to the deal. Now, that's the possibility of multipolarity. I am, of course, to be proven wrong in my theses, but I think that's what multipolarities do, and I don't think it's going to be good for minorities and for smaller countries because it's going to be a dog-eat-dog world where the bigger powers, the bigger new polars will say whatever they want and they'll do whatever they want to do without necessarily being subjected to scrutiny, as it's the case at the moment with the existence of a strong multilateral system. In fact, what I think we should be doing is should be strengthening the multilateral system, not necessarily encouraging the multipolar world.
Now, speaking to you, I have a question in mind. China today is considered a development country in the World Trade Organization. It is for you a development country?
No, of course not.
It is not a development.
I mean, I don't think
we are still benefiting from. Still having some benefits also from this multipolar world when it's all conditions. What do you think about it?
Well, it's a multilateralism that has made them to be that. Because, for example, an example of Kyoto Protocol, where Chinese are still regarded as developing nations. In other words, they can continue to pollute the world, notwithstanding that they've got over 1 billion human beings, and they are now flooding the entire economic system globally. I think they should take more responsibility. But of course, they're not going to take more responsibility because the world allows them, and the current systems allow them to be. So I don't think they're developing community, particularly when it comes to matters of environment. And they're doing a lot, by the way, notwithstanding, in terms of producing EVs and being responsible and being signatory and ratifying all the treaties that seek to improve and push back the challenges and the frontiers of climate change. So they are doing well in that regard. But I believe that they're not a developing world. They should be treated as such. They are the first economy, by the way, notwithstanding what they're told that they're the second largest economy. Don't think so. I think they're the number one economy, but they know exactly what it means to take the position. And if you take that position, as Spider-Man, my greatest inspirator, said that with great powers come great responsibility.
Absolutely. And looking ahead, what are the key opportunities and challenges for Africa in balancing its relations with China alongside other global powers like the United States, European Union, and others?
Well, I think Africans must continue doing what they're doing in terms of, as I've said earlier on, improving their own.
You are saying you are on a good path with China.
We are on a good path.
As a reliable partner.
We are on a good path. The only thing that we need to do, we need to get our house in order in terms of rules and regulations. The Chinese businessmen are aggressive, as you know.
All right.
They do business. And they're not going to come to your house and tell you, please close that loophole because I don't want you to lose money. Mm-hmm. No, they'll allow it to remain open so that they can continue making business. But what I think Africans need to do is to identify those loopholes in our own economic infrastructure and ecosystem, in making sure that not only do you protect your resources, but you also protect your own people, business people, but also prevent others who are coming in, particularly the Chinese, from exploiting the gullible businessmen in Africa, whether it's South Africa or Morocco. Only governments can do that. And in the absence of government intervention, not restrictions, intervention in terms of protection, you are likely, therefore, to have businessmen, whether they're from China or United States, coming in and taking advantage of the situation.
Thank you so much for those clear insights about the. You gave an incredible description of the Africa and China relations. Thank you very much, Doctor, for being with us today. Dear audience, thank you for following us in this episode. Thank you very much.